Welcome to Poehali, a space where we challenge biases and explore the intersection between disability, sexuality, and art. And today we have a conversation with disability advocate, consultant, and creator of Dystrophy Diaries, Zoe Harrison. And we are going to talk about her personal life and her professional experience and have a conversation about stigma around disability and sexuality and maybe about reshaping societal perceptions about it. Hi Zoe, thank you very much for participating. Could you please share your journey with Limb Girdle Muscular Dystrophy, if I pronounce it right, because I don't know, and how it has shaped your personal and professional life?
Yeah, so you did pronounce it correct. Limb Girdle Muscular Dystrophy, and I have type 1B, which is quite a rare mutation of limb dystrophy. It's been quite a long journey, I'd say, with the condition. I'm 26 now, and I first started with quite mild symptoms when I was around 4. Didn't really get a proper diagnosis until I was about 12. And yeah, my body has changed quite a lot over the years from where I obviously was at the start of my journey to where I am now, and that has been quite difficult. You go through a lot of different emotions and acceptance and a lot of frustrations when your body changes, but
Yeah,
I feel like it's kind of shaped me as a person who I am. I am quite resilient. I'm very appreciative of just general everyday life and feeling well. I do feel like it's shaped me as a person, and I quite like who I am as a person today. So I think that's maybe the one element I am thankful for with all the struggles that I've faced. What doesn't break you, does make you stronger, as they say.
yeah, that's right. And could you please tell us more about your condition? Like, uh, do you use a wheelchair like all the time, or maybe you can walk or stand a little bit?
Yeah, so my condition affects every muscle in my body. So, like all my limbs, my back, my neck, my head, my face muscles, and it also affects my heart, my stomach, my blood, so everything. Um, and I can walk a bit, but it's very difficult for me to walk. I have a lot of compensation, so I throw my hip. It's a difficult, strained walk. And so I use my wheelchair for outside of the house for big distances. And getting around places. Um, I'm able to drive, and I really love that. That gives me a lot of independence. Um,
Oh, and how do you drive? Do you have some kind of adapted car?
no, so I can only drive an automatic car because of
Hmm.
my arms. I can't change gears. Um, I probably would benefit from one of those, steering wheel adjustments, but my steering wheel on my car is really light to handle anyway. So
Hmm.
at the moment, I don't use one, but I think that is something I will need in the future, definitely.
Oh,
Um,
yes. And you are very motivational person, and your blog and your account is motivating me a lot. And what inspired you to become a disability advocate and a speaker?
Thank you for your very kind words. Really appreciate that. But really, I think my own personal journey inspired me. When I was younger, I was really unaccepting of my disability. You know, I had a lot of anger. I didn't like who I was. I found it really hard to accept that I was disabled, and I saw a psychologist for a few years and really worked through a lot of stuff. And when I came out the other side of it, I just really felt like I wanted to help other people like me. And that was really what inspired me to go to university and study psychology. But I also soon realised that I could just kind of do it away from like a formal setting. You know, I could still help people without having to make it like a career, if that makes sense. You know, having to go into like a therapist role. And yeah, I just started it, fell into it, and fell in love with it, and I've just kept going ever since. And I really enjoy it.
Yeah, it really seems like you enjoy it very much. And personally, I think that it's very important to have more such persons like you because I think that disabled people don't have enough representation in social media and mass media. And yeah, I think it's very important. And you also started Dystrophy Diaries podcast, which is very interesting and very empowering.
Thank
Uh,
you.
yeah, thank you. And why have you created this podcast? What was your intention, and what impact do you hope it has in business?
So honestly, I really did not expect to create a podcast. If you'd have told me 12 months ago that I'd have started a podcast, I'd have been like, no way, no way. But because I didn't think I'd want to put myself out there so much. But I obviously was doing a lot of my advocacy work, and I just thought, do you know what? It might help people to be able to watch videos and hear somebody going through what they're going through, like the good, the bad, the ugly, and see how they live their life. And you know, I could also use it as a way of showing what it's like to navigate life with muscular dystrophy. Um,
Mm. And do you take interviews with persons only with persons with muscular dystrophy? Or with,
so no, I have had people
Mhm.
on with so either with different disabilities or people who know of someone who has a disability, or somebody who um like is making a difference in the world, whether it be in the fashion world. You know, like I had a fashion student on recently who is
Mhm.
creating accessible fashion,
Oh
but
wow, that's so interesting.
I know she herself doesn't have a disability, but her sister does. So I try and have people on that I feel have some type of relatability to my podcast. I mean, everybody's always welcome, and you know, I would never turn somebody away just because they didn't, you know, have a disability or have a connection. But I just feel I'm very conscious that a lot of the message that I put out is trying to raise awareness or show people that, you know, they're not alone and all the incredible things disabled people do. So I want to try and keep a bit of a theme, if that makes sense, and not have someone on that maybe, I don't know, I wouldn't know how to interview them as such, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also know that you have an experience working as a consultant in NHS, if I'm right.
Yeah.
And um, what can you say about your experience and the types of organizations you collaborated with to promote accessibility?
So my time, I worked in the NHS for 2 years, in a mental health capacity, and then during my last year in the NHS, I luckily was able to sort of branch out into helping the trust that I worked with understand how they could be more accessible to disabled employees. So it started off with the grounds and, ensuring that everywhere was accessible, because there were some issues with some automatic doors that were too heavy for wheelchair users and other people with disabilities. So I raised that and helped them resolve that. I really feel it was it was really great to be able to try and make that difference, even though it was probably only a small difference in the grand scale of things. I still feel proud that I was able to offer like some of my experience and advice to that particular trust.
How, in your opinion, the NHS is it the welcoming and friendly space for a disabled worker or not? What how can you it it express your opinion on this?
So I found that for myself they were pretty welcoming, and I never felt like I ever didn't get a job because of my disability with them. I didn't ever feel like it was necessarily viewed as a negative thing or went against me. I'd say the only thing that I struggled with personally was the type of jobs that I was going for and that I had were quite physically demanding jobs. And obviously, because of the workload and work capacity on the NHS, it was quite difficult for me trying to do all the work that I had while also not overdoing it and not burning myself out. So I'd say that was probably the one thing that I did struggle with during my time.
What challenges you faced as a wheelchair user? And maybe you have some difficulties with infrastructure or social perceptions and expectations towards yourself, or maybe some sort of discrimination.
hmm So I was 10, I think, when I got my first wheelchair. And my first wheelchair was quite bog standard, like just quite, a bog standard motorised one. Wasn't really that snazzy. It was quite boxy and uncomfortable. Um, I mean, no child wants to get in a wheelchair, do they? I felt very different to everybody else. I'd never met anybody in a wheelchair before. I didn't have anybody else in my school that was in a wheelchair. I was always the odd one out in every social situation. And it was very difficult for me, to kind of accept it. I didn't accept it for a good few years. And I think that had quite a negative impact on how I viewed myself and, my self confidence. Um, but I have to say, like, once I worked through a lot of those issues and I accepted myself and I accepted my wheelchair, my life really opened up. And, like, I started to go out more, I started to enjoy life more in my wheelchair. And yeah, I'm really thankful that I got to that place where I didn't have such a negative perception of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I have a husband who is also a wheelchair user,
Mm-hmm.
and despite of my experience, he started to use wheelchair when he was already 20 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was a very difficult period of time for him. And he was isolated in his house, and he couldn't accept his wheelchair.
Yeah.
And finally, when he accepted that he is in a wheelchair, the life started to be much easier for him.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a common experience, and yeah, we should accept our uh, body condition, physical condition, because it's really essential for all people.
I think it's always that initial when you first get in one. I think whenever I speak to people that have, struggled accepting that, it's always that like first like year or few years, whatever, where it's an adjustment, isn't it? Like accepting that that's your new normal.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And also, I think that the art and the self-expression
Mm-hmm.
helps to accept your life uh, very, mm, yeah, very much. And do you use your photograph and maybe other skill, maybe other creative skill to express your experiences and advocate for the disabled community?
I'd say I really love painting as a hobby, and I would say I'm quite a creative person maybe, but I also feel like in a way my podcast is a bit of a creative
Yeah, sure.
expression.
It's very creative.
So I think that's probably the way I express myself the most, because like I really like to talk and have conversations and get my feelings and thoughts out that way. So I think the podcast really enables me to do that in a positive way.
Yeah, and also you wrote a book, didn't
Yeah,
you?
yeah.
It's something very big and significant. Oh my God, write a book.
I did it during the COVID pandemic, and it was just really. I think that was probably the first like big advocacy thing I did, because I wrote it because I wanted to
Mhm.
one tell my story, but also like help anybody else going through those challenges read it and feel like, oh, I'm not alone in this, and if she can do it, I can do it too. Um, and I think I also looked at it as like, what would I have liked to have read when I was going through my really hard times, and so
Yeah,
I just.
it's something I felt too. Like I didn't have some examples of other people who express themselves, and they uh, I didn't have anybody who told me about their life as a disabled person. So yeah, it's very important.
Yeah, I didn't have anybody else. Like, I always had a lot of people younger than me that would look at me for guidance, but I kind of figured it all out on my own.
Mm.
And so that's always been, I think, the really big, like, driving force for me. And a lot of my passion is I just feel like, well, what would I have liked to have known, when I was starting out? Like, who would I have liked to have that, what would I wanted them to tell me? So that was really the big thing behind the book, and also I guess a podcast too. But yeah, I just wrote it in, I think it took me like 4 or 5 months to write, and then I published it myself, and yeah. just been there ever since.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's so good that you did it. Because, yeah, as I said already, in my childhood and my adolescence, I didn't have anything like this, like any book, any film, and the way how disabled people were represented, like 10 years ago,
Yeah,
uh, in mass media and in books and films was awful because it it always was like
it was so negative, isn't it?
yeah, maybe not negative, but uh, it, either as inspirational porn
Mm,
or from the perspective of pity, maybe or something
yeah.
like that, maybe overcoming difficult challenges and struggles,
Mm.
like very strong persons. Yeah, it's not really fun and it's not the true perspective because there are a small number of disabled people who are writing or telling about themselves. And in your opinion, how media platforms better represent individuals with disabilities and challenge existing stereotypes? Like, what is your ideal representation? What would you like to What would you like to watch in film, for example?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question. Um, I think. Mm, so I think firstly, like so many disabilities are so varied and so different. So I think it's quite hard to think of a representation that would be ideal for everyone. But I think for me, what I would have liked to have known way back on the start of my journey is just that it wasn't going to be the end of the world, that, I could still go to university, I could still have a successful career, I could still date, get married, just live a normal life despite, the hard moments. And I think also what used to really frustrate me when I was younger was when medical professionals that were, in great health would just say, "Oh, it'll all be okay." And it's like, well, no, it won't all be okay, but that's okay too. Like, with your disability, there are going to be bad times. It's going to be times when you're really not well or you're in a lot of pain, but that doesn't mean your whole everything life is going to be bad too. If that makes sense. I don't know if I've worded that right, but like,
Yeah, absolutely, that's right.
I think that's kind of
Every life has its ups and downs.
exactly.
Mm,
I think that's really a big thing, and that's also what I try and show in my podcast. I'm very honest about when I'm not well and why I'm not well, and then I'm also honest about when everything's really good. And I think I want to show that it's good, bad, everything.
yeah. Do you have a romantic relationship right now? And yeah,
Yeah, I do. I'm actually getting married very soon.
is this person disabled or able-bodied?
He's able-bodied, which
And
I feel like is such like sometimes I don't know. I feel like sometimes people almost get surprised about that. Not disabled people, but sometimes like able-bodied people that like you just maybe meet out and about, have like a general chit chat conversation. It's like sometimes they'd be surprised that even though I'm disabled, I'm dating an able-bodied person.
yeah, yeah, sometimes it can even shock people.
Yeah,
And I think I think it's also because of the wrong representation of disabled people and particularly the sexual representation.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about this? Like, do you think that we have lack of sexual representations at all, or maybe this representation is wrong?
So I think sometimes there's almost like an awkwardness around it with disabled people and like able-bodied people. I think sometimes there's like not great like perceptions, or it's looked at as like people trying, if you're like, the more disabled you are, the more people are interested in like the logistics of it, or there's that interest, and it's like I've never really understood that, to be honest. I mean, it's a very personal thing for couples, and I think disabled people too, it's no different. Like, for them, they have normal relationships, they have normal desires, and it just it they're not there to be fantasized about or looked at in as like a in an intriguing, nosy way of, oh well, how does that work? And I think, yeah, that's always bothered me a bit, like that kind of intrigue about it.
Yeah, but I can tell that it seems to me like a constant silence about this topic. Like, I've never been perceived as a person with whom people can talk about some sexual or intimate stuff or tell about their partners or something like that. And it is really annoying, something very annoying.
Do you know what I feel? And this was actually something that I raised during my time in the NHS. Because obviously, like, with a disability like mine, it's a lifelong disability, and you're under like your core medical team from a young age up to adulthood. And the one thing that was never really like approached was, when you're like a teenager and you start transitioning into, having relationships, and that side of it. And I think when you're young, you have a lot of questions anyway. Like, it's a very complicated area, dating and having sex and all that. It's a lot anyway. But throwing in a disability, let alone one that can be quite complex, you have even more questions. And it's like, where do you go? Where are you supposed to seek advice or just talk to someone about it? You kind of have to just figure it out as you go along. And I think sometimes, I don't know. I mean, it's not necessarily something everybody wants to talk about. But I also think you should have that option where, if you feel you need to ask certain questions, and especially from a disability perspective, like, you should be able to seek just a bit of reassurance and support for that.
Yes, and if you're comfortable with it, can I ask you about your personal sexual experience as an individual?
Oh,
And
then,
uh,
okay.
especially, I'm interested, like, did the disability affect this and how and prevented you from some experience?
So personally, I don't think it's ever really had an impact. I don't feel like it's ever like impaired that area of my life. I don't feel like it's ever stopped me or had a negative impact. I think the only thing I would say is my disability had quite a negative impact on my self-confidence and the way, like, my body image when I was quite young, and I think that maybe impaired things a bit, because obviously if you're not very confident in your body image, that does have a negative impact on your dating life and you putting yourself out there. So I think there was definitely a few years where I maybe wasn't very confident, but once I learned to accept myself and love myself for who I am, that was when I felt comfortable to dating again and seeking relationships.
How do you think what improvements are necessary in societal infrastructure to enhance the inclusion of disabled individuals, particularly those with neuromuscular conditions?
Oh, oh gosh, that's quite a big question.
Yeah, but maybe you can tell something about your personal perspective as an individual. I mean, what improvements would you like to see for yourself personally? Maybe it would be easier for you. Like, what is your biggest challenge in infrastructure, in environment, in accessibility, maybe, or with relationships with somebody?
There's a few things, to be fair. I think the first one I'll start off is definitely been people's perceptions and society's difficulties. I think a lot of that has been because disabled people weren't really represented. Like, from a young age, the only disabled people I ever saw was maybe few and far between on the odd TV show, and they were perceived in a very negative way, which I think created some not great stereotypes for disabled people in society. And I think now, even though we're taking steps in the right direction, I think we're still dealing with a lot of those stereotypes now, and that then affects your relationships with certain, like if you meet someone and maybe they don't know how to communicate with you, like they feel awkward because they just have never met anyone in a wheelchair before. Like, I've experienced that many times, and it's
Oh,
not
yeah,
a great
I
feeling.
understand.
Yeah, and so I'd say society's perception and stereotypes is one barrier that I would like to see change. And then I'd say, in regards to accessibility, like, we live in a very inaccessible world, to go out places isn't always easy for me because, like, if I do walk, I struggle with, like, big curbs, big steps. Stairs are an issue for me. So if I don't take my wheelchair, I struggle. But then if I do take my wheelchair, I struggle because often a lot of places you can't fit a wheelchair in, or they don't have an accessible toilet. It's always very difficult to find places where I can go, where I'm going to feel comfortable and actually enjoy myself. It's not very nice going to places where, they're not really made for you. It makes it a really difficult experience.
Do you believe that frank conversation, open conversations like this can help to build better environments and better representation for disabled people and challenge biases?
I think so. I mean, I think the more we have conversations like this and the more we raise awareness and just are honest about our experiences and how we feel, I think only good can really come from that, really. I mean, that's another reason why I do my podcast and try and raise awareness of the experiences that not just I have but other people have. And I do hope that, because there's quite a few people now that, are advocating for the community and are big voices. And I think we are starting to see a shift in things and how changes have slowly started to be implemented.
Now, could you please share your hopes about the future or disability advocacy and your professional life and maybe some plans?
So I'd like to keep up the podcast for as long as I can, really. I'd like to obviously see it continue to grow and get like a wider community behind it. And I would like to keep building on my advocacy work and do some more public speaking. I think I really enjoy being able to speak in front of people and tell them about my experiences and help them make things easier for other people, and also just help them, like, if they're going through the same thing, help them not feel so alone. I really remember what it was like to feel like I was the only person going through what I was going through, and it was a really lonely, hard time, and I just don't want other people to feel like that if I can help it. Um, and I think just continue to hopefully make a positive difference. I want to really try and use what I've learned to help others like myself and in the community. So, in whatever capacity that looks like, I hope that's what I'm able to do for a long time.
And the final tricky question. Romantic things or living down to earth?
Oh. Mm. I think. Oh, I'd say that's a very close one, but I'd say down to earth, slightly tops romantic. Only because when I think about my partner Carl, like, he is just so kind and caring and patient and down to earth. And I think, and he won't like me saying this, but he is quite romantic too. But I think the parts I love about him the most are just his kindness and how kind and helpful he is to not just me, but to those around him too.
Yeah, thank you very much for this conversation. It was very interesting and very uplifting. And yeah, thank
No,
you.
honestly, thank you so much for inviting me on. It was really great to not just to meet you, but to have this conversation. Yeah, it was nice to be the one, like, not doing the interviewing for once, because I'm so used to asking the questions. It was nice to kind of just answer questions.